What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to Before the Roar, your preview podcast for the Detroit Lions. I'm your host, Meko, joined once again by my great co-host. First and foremost, we have your guy, Morgan Cannon. Morgan, how you feeling, my man?
Better now that it's Wednesday. You know what I'm saying? Better than Monday. Progress.
I was going to say, that's all I can ask for at this point, especially going into this next game. Also, we have, once again, joining us, Brandon Knapp. B-Knapp, how you feeling, my guy?
After what Morgan said, definitely feeling better throughout later in the week. Monday Night Football really kind of put the ease of the pain that was Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, and I think with the Lions having these two games that we're about to talk about, again, kind of recapping a little bit of week one, but also looking ahead to their matchup against the Chicago Bears. It's one of those games that Dan Campbell likes to say, like, hey, it counts for two, right? So, you don't quite come up on the winning side of the Green Bay Packers game, but you get an opportunity to kind of get one of those back against the Chicago Bears this week if they're able to get the win. Really looking at the Lions coming out of that game, like, Morgan, I'll start with you first. What are you most expecting this team to kind of get right coming out of last week's game?
It's going to sound like a cop-out answer, but walk with me here for a second. It's just execution, man. There are so many instances of just, especially on the offensive side of the ball in the trenches, just not executing, whether it was not hearing the communication. Several Lions players have talked about how it was loud there in Lambeau. I give Packers fans credit. Several players have talked about how lit it was inside there. So props to them. So miscommunication, just not hearing it, having ugly one-on-one reps where they're just, not playing with good leverage. So it wasn't just one thing that doomed the Lions against the Packers. It was just a multitude of different things. Definitely check out the website. Jeremy and Eric did a nice little breakdown on why the Lions couldn't get home when they did bring pressure. And then I did a written breakdown of the offensive line struggles and some of the issues there. That's something I kind of anticipate them getting right this week in Chicago. I don't expect them to be world beaters from that week one performance, but I do expect a step in the right direction and, not having as many MAs because it killed, man. It was like 16 of 22 carries. Jameer and David were hit behind the line of scrimmage. That, for a Lions team that prides themselves on running the football and dictating the game, that can't happen, right?
No, it can't, Brandon. And I think that's the thing that I think if you're Dan Campbell, he even talked about that today when he was meeting with the media. Like, it's about execution. It's about limiting the mistakes that they have on the field. And I think that goes not just for the offensive side, but I think it goes for the defensive side as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the defense did make me feel better than the offense. They made some stops. It was a struggle bus in the first half, but they were able to, at least throughout the game, outside of maybe one drive, slow down the run game. So when it comes to at least that side of the ball for their identity of stopping the run, they were able to kind of commit to that. While the offensive side, Morgan and Eric and Jeremy kind of pointed out that they were struggling to move the chains on the ground. So if they can fix that and correct it at Meko, I really think this week can be a turnaround.
So that's what the Lions, I think what we can all agree that they can probably do, from their perspective to kind of get on the right side of things. We're going to get into that a little bit more later in this podcast as well. But let's look at the Chicago Bears because they too are coming off of a loss in week one, a second half collapse in a lot of ways, blowing a 17-6 lead to the Minnesota Vikings. And now they're a little bit on a short week, having played on Monday, now having turned around and play on Sunday at Ford Field. This is a game where the Lions are currently favored by 5.5 according to FanDuel. How are you guys, again, initial feelings, knowing that, Chicago did have that collapse, knowing that the Lions are favored? Morgan, overall just expectations going into this game.
Well, I'm not one to sit here. Chicago got a lot more talented in the offseason. I know we like to make fun of the Bears, but they do have a lot of weaponry. I still really like their skill guys. And to be honest with you, I don't know, for people listening to this, I have a 3-month-old. So sleep is paramount right now. So I did go to bed at half, but I did get back and watch the second half on all 22. Minnesota just kind of had their way with them in the second half, man. Their Chicago's offense was really, to be quite honest, pretty ugly outside of the first 15, that scripted, that Ben had working since probably the summertime when he first took the job, but really got into the weeds with it. But yeah, the Vikings just took control, right? They scored with 12 minutes in the fourth quarter, then a little less than 10. Then they scored again at 2:53. And boom, they were right there. And you hate to see that for a Bear because they were excited. That it sounded loud at Soldier Field. The pick six, I feel like the roof blew off that place. But you got to finish, man. Like those Lions teams back in the day, that's kind of what the Bears remind me of right now. The
Mm-hmm.
2022 Lions, you know what I'm saying? Like more talented, kind of getting their stuff together, but maybe like the early Lions where they're talented and they're tough. They're going to be a tough out, but they don't quite know how to finish just yet.
Yeah, I think that's something that was definitely on display in week one, Brandon. And I think one of the other things that like I kind of took away from that game is just like Morgan was kind of saying, like Chicago is still kind of figuring things out. Like those first 15 plays, like great, everything is off to the races. But a lot of that game felt very similar to the Lions Packers game where it's like, hey, Chicago gets out to this lead. It's 17-6 going into the fourth quarter and it still doesn't quite feel like they've been dominating. And I think that's becomes like one of the differences between you look at like Detroit and what they were able to do against Green Bay versus what Minnesota was able to do, because they get into that fourth quarter and you kind of said it before we started recording, but like JJ eventually kind of just gets into a rhythm and they start moving as an offense. So that's something for me when I look at this Bears team. Like I don't know if they've yet kind of figured out how to string a whole game together under Ben Johnson just yet.
Yeah, Miko, 100%. Like Morgan was saying, that first drive was just flawless. It was, everything was exactly the way they wanted it to go. And as the game progressed, you saw, kind of regress here and there. You didn't see everything. Caleb had to do lots of plays with his legs, constantly had to, avoid pressure, keep plays alive. He did make a beautiful throw to Roma Dunze as he was running towards the sideline. So that's definitely going to be something Detroit's going to have to contain. But, outside of that, they just seemed like like you guys were both saying, they just can't finish yet. They're still learning exactly what to do and how to go ahead and finish that game. The crowd was electric. I thought, wow, Chicago could actually be what, they always hype up every offseason. And then the fourth quarter happened, JJ McCarthy happened, and it just turned into what we've kind of seen out of the Bears the last couple years. And it kind of did surprise me, but at the same time, it didn't. First game jitters, first game everything for Ben Johnson. And Meko, I'm not sure, what we're going to see this upcoming week, but it's definitely going to be interesting.
I'm so like as like listening to you say that, it made me start to wonder, like, are the Chicago Bears the Dallas Cowboys of the NFC North, where it's like every year teams just like people assume that Chicago's going to do something and it just never quite materializes the way we think it will.
It's a big market, man. Like I do think that the league wants them to be good because it's such a huge fan base, and I do think like they're going to be good. I think they're going to be better later in the season, though. So I'm kind of happy that we're getting them week 2. And to be honest with you, like I think the worst case scenario for the Bears was what happened to the Lions in week 1, where they kind of just got there, like they didn't play well. Like yes, they got pushed around a little bit, but like Taylor Decker had a quote today talking to the media here on, we're recording this Wednesday night, saying like essentially no one got their like butts kicked the whole game. You know what I mean? It was like a snap here, a snap there, execution, miscommunication. But like they're gonna want to get this right. They're gonna be ready to roll. So I understand like Vegas is hitting us with according to FanDuel, the Lions are currently favored by 5.5 at home. And that kind of makes sense just with like how the week 1's played out for both Chicago and Detroit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think something else that's going to see, or at least we need to see how it's going to play out this week, is how injuries, right? It's like it's only the second week of the season, but a lot of teams are already putting guys on season-ending IRs, or they're having to, make adjustments with their roster. You look at the Lions injury report as of today. Jack Campbell didn't practice with an ankle injury. Taylor Decker didn't practice today with a shoulder injury. Trevor Nowatzki and Sione Vaki were both limited with the injuries that kind of kept them out last week. But the thing that is a surprise, though, to me, Brandon, is that Terrion Arnold was a full practice despite the groin injury that he suffered that kind of took him out, I think, going into the second half of last week's game against the Packers. So a bit of a relief when you look at the Lions side of their injury report.
Yeah, Miko, I was expecting Terrion to be limited at best, and to see full was a good sign to see. But then as soon as I saw Taylor Decker didn't practice, my first thought was, okay, hopefully it's a rest day. Maybe it's just ease him in. He had a rest day last Friday. And when I saw shoulder, I was like, oh, that's not good. Not a good early start for him. I'm a little questionable about Jack, but I'm not too worried about him. But overall, things could be worse, but things could also be better for Detroit.
Yeah, Morgan, when I look at like the linebacker position, like if there's a situation where maybe Jack can't go, which again, it's way too early to say that right now. I at least feel like they have the depth to be able to cover that, right? Like you could easily slide Alex over to the mic. Derek Barnes can move to the will. You can start working in, Zach Cunningham or Grant Stewart in those situations. Taylor Decker possibly not being able to play this week, or at least being a do not practice for today, is the one that kind of gets your antennas up, because if I remember correctly, Dan Skipper was dealing with something last week, and they've already had to put Jamarco Jones on season-ending IR, which would only leave you Giovanni Manu, who has yet to start a full game.
Yeah, that's a little bit scary. And Decker, again, going to his presser today, he said he's just working through some things, and hopefully, like his words were, hopefully I'll be out there Sunday. Kind of take that how you will. But I'm hoping he trends like to play. He's getting up there though. What is he, 32? And I know that sounds crazy, but he's had a couple like ailing things, like whether it's the shoulder. I can't remember if it was a knee or something lower body a couple years ago. But yeah, like it's one of those things where it adds up. It's something to watch the rest of this week for sure. And with Jack, I feel like he's one of those. He's gonna play, man. He's one of those guys that I think he'd have to have something hanging off of him to not play, right?
Old school linebacker mentality. Like it's not, hanging off, or it's not completely broken. I'm going to go out there and play type of situation. Just like give me a brace and I'll be fine. Yeah, I could definitely see Jack Campbell pull that type of move. When you flip things over to the Chicago Bears side, though, they also have some notable names that are dealing with some injuries in terms of not practicing. Recently acquired defensive tackle Grady Jarrett didn't practice today with a knee injury. You also have slot corner Kyler Gordon, who missed practice due to a hamstring injury. And then they also have a couple of guys that were limited in practice that are fairly active in terms of like being in a rotation. Roshan Johnson was limited in practice with a foot injury. TJ Edwards, linebacker, was limited with a hamstring injury as well. And then you also had wide receiver Ja'Day Walker, as well as Josh Blackwell, who were also limited in practice as well. However, DJ Moore and Jalen Johnson, both full participants in practice, which is something that I think if you're the Lions, like those are two names that you're absolutely circling when it comes down to how you attack both of those players on both sides of the ball, right, Brandon?
Yeah, Meko, absolutely. If they do get Jalen Johnson back, that'll be a good upgrade for him. And if I recall correctly, I think Kyler Gordon was limited in practice last week. So if he went down to do not practice, that's definitely going to be a step back, and maybe something got tweaked. I did watch the game, but I don't recall Grady Jarrett leaving the game with an injury. So I'm not sure when that kind of occurred. But missing, probably their best defensive tackle is definitely going to be a step back for him. And I really think out of all the players, when it comes to their injuries, TJ Edwards is kind of like the heartbeat of that defense. Morgan, you might agree with that one, but I really think if he does not play, that's really going to affect the interior even more, because he is so good at getting to the not to the linebackers, to the running backs and stopping the run. And he's also pretty well coverage linebacker. So if he can't, do either or, I think Chicago is going to be kind of hurting there.
Yeah, and honestly, man, does DJ Moore need like some sort of like war medal or accommodation for practicing today? Because I don't know if you're listening to this podcast, man, that ball that Caleb Williams threw him, like we're gonna have to have a talk. Like bro, well, you're trying to get me chopped in half, bro? Like that was
I was gonna say, I'm sure they had a conversation once he like got out of the blue tent, once everyone was like moving like in the locker room, like, hey, bro, that never throw that to me ever again.
That was not okay. But yeah, Grady Jarrett being out, they do have, they still have Sewell, they have Edmonds still at linebacker. But yeah, Jalen Johnson, in my opinion, is one of the best in football. Like he's up there with PS2 for me, Passer 10. So yeah, that would be big for them getting him back. So something to watch, a couple things to monitor throughout the rest of the week.
Absolutely. So let's move to the next segment of the podcast, where we kind of focus on how the Lions can attack the Bears offense. Because I think at the end of the day, when you talk about a Ben Johnson led team, like the thing that everyone has been talking about ever since Ben took this gig over in Chicago is like how explosive this offense is going to be. And I think if you're Dan Campbell and Kelvin Shepherd, like you want to limit it. You want it to be as challenging as it possibly can be for Ben, for Caleb Williams, and of those, litany of weapons that they have over there on the offensive side. So Brandon, I'm going to start with you. What is something that you kind of look at that the Lions need to attack to be able to limit this Bears offense?
It's going to be the same issue that the Lions had last week, and that's the interior offensive line. If you trust PFF when it comes to their kind of statistics, Jonah Jackson, Drew Dalman, and Joe Thuney combined for 13 pressures allowed. Now, I know the Lions' pass rush was not super effective last week against Green Bay, but if they're able to kind of attack that interior, that would be huge. And then what the best part is, while the interior did struggle, another, tweaking part that was not the best, that was even a preseason battle for Chicago, was at left tackle and Braxton Jones. He allowed 6 pressures. So even if they can't focus on the interior, they can still get Hutchinson probably on Braxton Jones to get that pressure on the outside. And if the pressure is too much on the interior, they might have to leave Jones on an island, which I know no one wants to do against Aiden Hutchinson, but it might be something they have to resort to if they cannot just contain the interior pressure that they have. And then also, you got to keep Williams in the pocket. There were so many times when I was watching the game Monday night that I'm like, oh, Williams is going to go down, and he just just jumps around, just gets everybody out of the way, avoids the sacks. And I'm like, how does this guy keep doing this? You're like, I don't want to say he's like Mahomes, but he reminds me so much of how Mahomes can just wiggle around and just extend plays. And it's frustrating. Even though I'm not even going up against, or any of my teams are playing Williams, I just don't like seeing defenses have chances to get sacks and they just miss out on it because the quarterback's so elusive. And that's credit to Caleb for sure, Morgan. And I just really think that is the best thing that Detroit needs to do to win this game.
Yeah, and it kind of feeds right into like what I was thinking about when I watched that film and thought about how the Lions want to go about this. So we talked about it. Williams had his bright spots. Those first 15 were pretty. That first series, I was like, oh snap! Like Ben's got them clicking. But as we say, this first 15 can be a bit of a mirage because no crap, if you practice the same sequence of plays over and over again, you're going to get pretty good at them. But then once you get out of that, it's about execution on a down-to-down basis. So what you've been seeing a lot of with breaking down Williams' play against Minnesota, he struggles with playing on time. And what we mean with playing on time is like you're playing on schedule. You hear people talk about it, coaches, analysts, commentators. It's being where you need to be with your eyes and then with the ball quickly, right? You have to snap through those progressions, 1, 2, 3. Like I got to check it down. If I'm hot, like where am I going to go with the ball if there's a free runner? So to Brandon's point, I really think it's going to be another week of crushing the pocket because what you don't want, in my opinion, because Brandon talked about, he's a good athlete, man. He's not overly huge, but he'll shrug off. Like he shrugged off Grenard. I was like, dang, like Brandon said, he'll like wiggle out of stuff. And you don't want him to make that back-breaking play when he scrambles, right? Like you do flush him out of the pocket. He's not super tall. I'd rather crush that pocket around him and make it tough for him to throw over the middle. Or if he does throw over the middle, that's when you can get a turnover. Because I think we need one this week, man. I hate going a whole game without a turnover. I'm too spoiled now, right, Meko?